Hey, it's Mazzy again. This video is for the band and Robbie Robertson, who just passed away today when I'm recording this. I don't think I'm going to post this for a few days, but I just wanted to get some music out, some emotions out. It's been a rough few weeks with today also. Cisco Rodriguez died, and just last 2 weeks, I guess, Sinead O'Connor, and we get to a certain age. Not that Sinead O'Connor was anywhere near that age. Robbie Robertson was 80 years old. I didn't realize he was that old. He was still composing for films, especially, mostly, a lot of Martin Scorsese's films, including his upcoming film coming out this fall. He would basically be the, not doing all the incidental score, but being the music director and curating music, coordinating the films on this. And of course, I've been a huge band fan since 1968 with the release of music for Big Pink. I'm going to go through my collection, talk about the music a little bit. But he did a series of CDs for Geffen Records, solo CDs, and I actually like these CDs. Now, this one is music for Native Americans. His mother was First Nations. He was born in Toronto, so obviously in his DNA there is Indian blood. This is called Storyville. Series of these records, these CDs, which I have, albums, same thing, are really interesting, and I actually like them. There's a lot of depth to them. There's a lot of layers, dark in some ways, and there's a mood to them. And I love his arranging and his guitar playing and the use of different musicians and how these are produced. I would say the weak link, which has always been the case, is Robbie Robertson was not a great singer. He was one of the greatest songwriters in rock music ever, and which became sort of a bittersweet thing in terms of the legacy of the band and the other members of the band. But you notice that he never sang lead on any of those songs on band albums. You'd see him and you'd hear him sing some harmonies. But when you're in a group with Levon Helm singing, with Rick Danko singing, with Richard Manuel singing, right there, those three great vocalists, all different styles, different types, and of course with Garth Hudson on the keyboards and the organ. And it's interesting, I was thinking about this, who would have thought that Garth Hudson would be the last band member standing? Quite interesting. But Robbie Robertson, the band were a Canadian band except for Levon Helm, who I believe was from Arkansas. So prior to calling themselves the band were called the Hawks in Canada, and they backed Ronnie Hawkins, and they were his backup band, touring a lot, and really got the lay of the land and the road with Ronnie Hawkins. Later, they would hook up with Bob Dylan, of course, that infamous 1966 concert with Dylan live in the band, that infamous show in the United Kingdom, in the UK, not at the Royal Albert Hall, but in Manchester, that famous recording. And then, of course, in 1968, this album. This is a groundbreaking album, and this changed things up a lot. This is at the end of all the psychedelia stuff was changing, even in UK, the blues band. Now, one would argue that this was sort of the main thrust of Eric Clapton breaking up and getting out of Cream with that psychedelic. Once he heard this record, once a lot of people heard this record, it was a change in direction in rock and roll and music, and American and British music. This is a very roots-oriented album. This is music from Big Pink. This is the house where the band and Dylan would record all these demos that Dylan was working on. And those demos from Big Pink would later be put out amongst the first bootlegs, Great White Wonder, the demos, a selection of those records. And obviously some years later, I think it was 1975, Columbia finally put out the Basement tapes. This shows there Robbie and the rest of the band with Bob Dylan. This was an answer to the whole bootlegging, and great songs. A lot of these songs would come out, for instance, the Mighty Quinn, Manfred Mann did, but the band and Dylan holed up at Big Pink upstate New York. An incredible time for some incredible music. But let's go back to this record. This record contains some of the most amazing songwriting ever and some great vocalizing. Now, I won't get deep into the whole story of Robbie Robertson, and over the years, especially after the band split up after The Last Waltz, and then the band continued in a different form without Robbie Robertson, and went through a number of years and some records in a whole different direction of music. A lot of infighting within the members of the band. And this is something that happens with a lot of musicians and a lot of artists in this kind of caliber and this level, I guess. When you have a songwriter or two that writes all the music, they own the publishing for the most part, unless publishing was sold, or there are certain groups, I believe, like REM and Doors, or the two offhand that I can recall, two bands that, if you look at the writing credits, the entire band is credited, even though one or two maybe members wrote those songs. Obviously, in those cases, they're including the contribution of making the records, the performing. Sometimes it's a lead guitar, sometimes it's a piano riff. Whatever it is, that's what those bands decided. But in most cases, look at Lennon and McCartney. They became the richest because of the publishing of the Lennon-McCartney songs. And same with the band. Robbie Robertson, wrote virtually every single song and all the hits, as much as they had hits, but these songs were covered. Music for Big Pink, of course, you have Tears of Rage, which is actually a Dylan song, co-written with Richard Manuel. You got Kingdom Come, you got In a Station by Manuel, but the big song on this album is The Wait. I mean, what a great, great song written by Robbie Robertson. We have We Can Talk, Longback Veil, Chest Fever, another Robertson song, This Wheel on Fire, and I Shall Be Released, Dylan songs. So here, Robbie Robertson only has several songs here. So this is the start of something that would really expand on their next album. Now, this is what I'm considered the best album of the band. If you have no band albums, this would be first. Music from Big Pink would be second as far as I'm concerned. Both these albums were produced by John Simon, and this is literally a perfect album in this sort of this genre that's very Americana, considering all but one are Canadians. The whole songwriting of the South, the Civil War, the Confederacy versus the Union, a very historic writing and very unusual for Canadians. And it's kind of interesting that the songwriting Robbie did was of this time and this sound, and very timeless songs, not really songs that you would think of someone recording in 1968, 1969 in rock and roll venues. Look at this picture of them. I mean, they look something right out of a daguerreotype or tintype from the Civil War. I just think this is a beautiful album, self-titled. If you can find a Robert Ludwig cut, that is the one to get of this album. Across the Great Divide, Robertson song. Rag Mama Rag, Robbie Robertson. The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down. Now that's a song, I think it's from the position of the Confederacy. Great song, great voice in his lyrics and songwriting, but it's the other members of the band who sang. You know, it's one of those what if they were brought in on songwriting credits, but they didn't write the songs, the other members. And there was a very tempestuous situation. If you read Liv on Helm's book, which I read years ago, you'll see it right there, and very bitter, a lot of bitterness there, which is really unfortunate. Whispering Pines. Now, Levon Helm co-wrote with Robbie Robertson, Jeremiah Surrender, a great song. We got Rockin' Chair, Lookout Cleveland, Robbie. Jawbone, Manuel and Robbie. Unfaithful Servant, Robbie. King Harvest. I mean, every song on here is a spectacular just demonstration of American songwriting from and by a Canadian. And the performances are iconic. They're sublime. This is one of the great rock pop records of the last 100 years, definitely. The band's second album. Then there's Stage Fright, again, continuing with some great songs like The Shape I'm In, Just Another Whistle Stop, W.S. Walcott Medicine Show, Daniel and the Sacred Harp, Stage Fright. Their arrangements were so good. And I first saw the band when they backed Bob Dylan in 1974 on this album. I saw 2 shows at the Open Coliseum. This was Bob Dylan's comeback. They had, earlier this year, Dylan had signed to Asylum away from Columbia, and they did this album, Planet Waves, where the band basically backs Dylan on these songs. And I love this record. It doesn't always get a lot of love because it's sort of a loose, funky, swampy record. The playing is seemingly uneven, but it's not. It's right in the pocket. But it's just so loose, like it seems like one take. But who knows? Dylan would try things so many ways. With Tough Mama, Hazel, Something About You, of course, Forever Young, 2 different versions of that, You Angel You, and other songs here. And this was just recorded like literally 3 days, this record, Planet Waves, with the band. Again, that funky, loose sound. And I always liked the staccato guitar playing of Robbie Robertson. He doesn't always get on lists as the best guitar players, but he had a really unique sound. Very staccato, like he's sort of missing the fret and the strings. Sounds exactly like that. But it's a great sound. And my buddy Coleman, who I've talked about on my channel, had a striking resemblance to Robbie Robertson and play guitar. When he was up there, he had that long, tall, lanky look and had the hair in the 1970s of Robbie Robertson. And I always used to say he looked like Robbie. But these 2 records, this is sort of my first heavy dive into the band. Then we have this album. We have Cahoots. There they are. This looks almost like a Richard Avedon photograph, but I don't know if that's the case. It is. It's Richard Avedon. I know my photographers. Also did On the Third Day by ELO. Richard Avedon also did Bookends. Did those great Beatles 1967 posters that are psychedelically embellished. Love Richard Avedon, but that's another story. Cahoots by the band. We have, again, Life is a Carnival, When I Paint My Masterpiece. That's actually the Dylan song on here. 4% Pantomime is so great, and Van Morrison pops in and sings along with them on that. But another good album, not as good as those first few. And then an album that some say maybe was a misstep, and they seemed to get lost here, but they wanted to go back and do a rock and roll record of covers. And this is called Moondog Matinee. This is the cover of the album, but this was the outer cover that opened up in a poster form. There you go. Juke joint, open all night, members of the band all around there, illustrated for your enjoyment. And it has rock and roll songs like Ain't Got No Home, Holy Cow, Share Your Love, Mystery Train, of course, a great song that Elvis made. I love on here Third Man theme from Third Man, the Orson Welles, Joseph Cotten, great noir, classic film, instrumental. Promised Land, Great Pretender, I'm Ready, Saved, Change Is Gonna Come. In a way, a novelty record, but again, the vocals make it. The arrangements are fairly faithful to the original. So the band, Moondog Matinee. I always say that my favorite live album, the best live album, is Little Feat's Waiting for Columbus. I still think that's the case, probably, even though it's been embellished in studio a little bit. But also I mentioned, obviously, the Allman Brothers live at the Fillmore. But this is a close third, and maybe, you could interchange them depending on your mood. This was, I believe, New Year's Eve, this at Brooklyn Academy of Music. This is a fantastic album. Horn arranged by Alan Toussaint. It's got John Simon again producing. What a fabulous sounding record. There is an expanded CD version that has the entire thing with Dylan in it. Dylan is not on this, but the horn arrangements just give it more of a New Orleans soulful sound to it. And it's got all their hits. And of course, recorded 71, 72 at the Academy of Music on the eclipse of the New Year Eve. And this is Rock of Ages, a fantastic record. This will get some spinning tonight in my house and for the next few days, definitely. Then the band kind of went through a period where they didn't get a lot of love. You know, they were probably going to be dumped by Capitol. I got promos of these. This is when I was in the record business. And we have Northern Lights, Northern Cross, and Island. This is probably Island's my least favorite and probably their worst. But even their worst is a great album with some songs. Right as Rain is a great song. Christmas Must Be Tonight. They did a great Christmas single, and that came out as a single, as I recall. It's okay album. It's still the band. It's still the great vocals, great songwriting. This is a good album. And I remember when I got this album, and I really liked it, and I think it didn't get a lot of love in the music press, but it has Arcadian Driftwood, such a beautiful record, and Ophelia and Jupiter Hollow is kind of a catchy end bit here. And I really like this album by the band, Northern Song, Southern Cross. And of course, coming to the end, you can't talk about the band without talking about The Last Waltz. If you haven't seen this concert film, it's probably one of the best concert films ever made. Scorsese directed it. It was at Winterland, Thanksgiving, 1976. I was so fortunate to attend. It cost $25, and you'd get a full turkey dinner. They had tables out in Winterland. Now, a couple buddies and I went, but we went to my parents first. My mom said, come on, you can't not come to Thanksgiving at your family's house. And they only lived like a half hour away from me, not even that. And so we went there at 4 o'clock, got out of there, went to Winterland as they were taking down the tables before the music started. This was a surprise. It was $25 altogether to get in, but it was one of the best shows I've ever seen. None of us knew who was going to be there. Of course, you think it's going to be Dylan. Who else is going to be there? So you got Eric Clapton, you got Muddy Waters, you got Ronnie Hawkins, you got Van Morrison, you got Neil Young, and the film of that where they had to literally retouch by hand in those days every frame to get that big rock of cocaine up from shooting up his nostril. Yeah, but did I mention Joni Mitchell? Neil Diamond. He was the odd man out in a way. It almost didn't seem like he should be there. But Robbie Robertson had produced the most recent at the time, Neil Diamond album. Great film, great performance. Again, one of the highlights of my life. Ronnie Wood was there. Ringo was there, not singing leads. They were out there, came on. Of course, in the film version, they added a few artists that couldn't make it. Emmylou Harris, the Staple Singers, big part of the history and the music of the band. But it was such a great night for Rick Danko, Levon Helm, Garth Hudson, Richard Manuel, and Robbie Robertson. Oh, Paul Butterfield, I forgot to mention. Dr. John, great album. Now, that's pretty much it. I just want to do something for Robbie Robertson. And in closing out, I want to show something that's pretty special. And if you're a CD person, or even if you're a vinyl person, but you still play CDs and you want something extremely special, this is a great selection. There have been comps and various selections and best ofs of the band, but this is a musical journey. The band, a musical journey. This is a book and 6 CD set with this great sort of photo illustration cover by Ed Ruscha. Ed Ruscha did McCartney 3, that cover. A famous fine artist, did a beautiful job here. This goes to the entire history of the band, starting as the Hawks, the band at Winterland, one of their early shows at Winterland, and that is the reason they returned to Winterland for The Last Waltz. Of course, the band, it looks, again, something right out of the Civil War with Bob Dylan. Just a great, great overview of one of the greatest bands, literally, ever. How ballsy is it to call yourself the band? And if you see, and if you watch The Last Waltz, you'll see that, the band. And there's Robbie Robertson styling the band. Anyway, rest in peace, Robbie, Robbie Robertson. You wrote some great music, and despite any detours of bullshit along the way in the music business, there's always something. We still love your songs. We love the way the band performs the song. At least I do, probably better than anyone else. Although we all know some of those hits have had great, great cover versions. Thanks for the songwriting. Thanks for watching again. Mazzy loves you.